Hey everybody, this is Volen in Pursuit of Art. Today we have a question from our friend Louise, and I really like this question because it pretty much exudes frustration and confusion. I like it because I've definitely been there. I understand exactly what you're saying, Louise, and when I read you guys a question, it's going to sound confusing because that's how it's phrased. I'm going to try and decipher it a little bit for you. But this is really the foundation of so much skill based learning. It's the difference between observing something and knowing about it and taking that surface knowledge as an illusion to think that you know everything that there is to know about it or even that you understand it. There's a big difference between an intellectual surface understanding and really grasping. I think it was Robert Heinlein that coined the term to grok something in one of his novels, which I haven't read. I just know the term. So I think knowing something internally, deeply, not even necessarily, I'm sure almost everyone has met people that are really good at something, that can do something very well, but then when you ask them, hey, how'd you do that? They don't know. Does that mean they understand the thing or not? Do you have to be able to just say something and sound smart in order to at least give people the illusion that you know something? Or are you supposed to produce and just have something come out of you that you don't even necessarily know how to explain? One is knowledge based, and knowledge is very important. So I'm not going to say anything. Well, we'll probably say a few things about not going the traditional way that we've been taught to learn, which is just very knowledge memorization based. School doesn't really do anything, or at least when I was in school, there was nothing that would prepare you for learning a skill. It was learning facts, but really the way that you perform a skill is very different, and how you learn it is also very different from that method of learning, which just prepares you to be able to, if someone asks you, you could go through your mental index of stuff that you've stored, and maybe you might just be able to give it back. That's all that was required. There's no purpose to that sort of learning. It doesn't really presuppose that you're going to be taking these facts and doing something with them. You're just cramming them in there. And a lot of us get stuck in that mode of learning because we've been through 12 plus years of doing that. And when you get praised for it, and when you repeatedly go through that process, you kind of form the illusion that that's all there is. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the difference between skill learning and knowledge learning. And Louise's question really is about, hey, I'm understanding what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm seeing it. I'm recognizing it. So that means knowledge. So I have the knowledge of this thing, or I have knowledge learning of this thing. And then when I try to do it, nothing happens. Like, why? Like, I don't even get it. And that's why I like the question, because it's just filled with frustration and confusion. And I remember exactly what that was like. I see it, I get it. Well, how come? Like, if I get it and I see it, why can't I use it? Why can't I just take it from here and put it there? And there's obviously a gap there. And it's also a very tricky gap. It's a sneaky gap. Because it's not really explained. It's not really something that you will have a lot of experience with. It's just something that, I don't really want to say that word, but to some degree you have to intuit. And since we're going to be talking a lot about things that are unsaid, that aren't necessarily translatable into words. And let me just maybe take a quick second here and just say there is that gap, because knowledge-based learning and repetition or regurgitation of that learning comes from the prefrontal cortex. So you have access to all this stuff. You can verbalize the knowledge, and you can analyze it. You can dissect it. So something comes in, goes to your prefrontal cortex, your most evolved part of the brain. You can think about it linearly, logically, and then you can speak about it also. That part of the brain controls those processes. But skill actually doesn't live there. Skill is way too complex to be able to if you had to mentally think about what it is you're doing, about every single task, like walking or doing things like that, you'd never be able to do anything. We're not smart enough for that yet. We can only do one thing at a time, consciously and focusedly. So that's why skill actually lives in the basal ganglia and just other older regions in the brain, which are less expensive to run, and they're also a lot more powerful. So when you automate stuff, it gets relegated to older areas of the brain, areas that aren't necessarily associated with language, which is why, like we said before, someone that's really good at something may not be able to explain why they're good at it at all. So, and a newbie or someone that's really into this stuff, very nerdy, that's how I was when I was starting out, they would explain and over explain the smallest thing because they just don't get it. How come I can see it and understand it, but I can't do it? So I'm going to over explain how I see everything, how I understand all the details, but it really does you no good, because really what you're after is that internal, deep-seated knowledge coming from the basal ganglia, from the nether regions of the brain, right? From the older parts, primal knowledge almost. If you think about it, you need to do things so much that it almost becomes a part of you to such a degree that you don't even notice it. You don't even know that you're good at something because you've internalized it so deeply, it's become a part of you. You don't even remember it. You don't notice it. That was a pretty long intro now to a question I was hoping to answer quickly. So I'm going to read you the question in just a sec. Before I get there, I just want to say a big, quick thank you for all the people on the channel. Like, I'm seeing some amazing comments. You guys are being not only awesome in your comments to me, but you talk amongst yourselves. Like, when someone has a problem, people go and try and help. And that's amazing to me. I think I mentioned it in another video, numbers aren't really very important to me, but the quality of the community that's forming is really awesome. And I really appreciate it. And thank you guys very much for that. I'm actually, one thing I have to say is that I'm running a video ahead of you, which means that when something happens, so I just posted the video about, it had a great response. I'm buying time and I'm trying to remember the title right now. I can never remember my videos. If you guys ever meet me anywhere, I'll probably won't remember any of my videos. Enjoying your practice when you really suck. So that video, a lot of people send me messages. A lot of people got in contact on all kinds of different places. So one thing to say is, if you're looking to find me, YouTube is probably the best place. There's also an email that you can get me on. So if you just go on the website, or if you go in the about here on YouTube, you can just find my email there. But really, just leaving me a comment is the best place to find me. So I don't even know how I found messages on DeviantArt, because I don't really go there very often. So I'm just saying, if you need me or if I'm not responding, I'm probably not on that thing very much. So YouTube comments, best place to find me. Also, thank you. And I'm curious, because it seems like I've hit upon something that people responded to strongly. So I'll be curious to find out more. So if you can, let me know exactly what it is that you found powerful about that video, and I'll continue on in the same vein, because I'm looking for what's most helpful to you. So like I was saying, I'm running about 10 days ahead of you, so that means that there's a video in between. So I just posted that one. I just posted that video. I forgot the title again. How to enjoy your practice when you really suck. So I just posted that video. Then there's going to be another video in between that I've already recorded before. And now I get to respond to that next video. So there's going to be a gap. So as soon as I post this one, I'll be responding to that and the comments that came from that in the video after the next one. Hard to wrap your head around that. Okay, so back to the question. I'm going to read it for you now. It's probably going to sound a little bit confusing, but I will clarify it in a sec. So this was posted on one of the videos I did for understanding values and what they mean. It was on one of those. So it was mostly observation based. And Louise's question is asking, how do you, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, I have no idea how to pronounce most people's names, which is ironic because I have a weird name. So this is what the question is. I have a question for you. When you're trying to figure out values about a subject, this process is okay. So that means the observational process that I was showing in the video. But when you are creating, question mark. When you try to paint a ball over a square or a rock, just trying to paint in value, simple forms, why is it so difficult? We know how these forms behave with light It's very simple. But when you paint them, it's impossible. So here we go. There's the core of the question there. How come I can see it, but I can't do it? That doesn't even make any sense. Like, how come I can see it, but I can't do it? Like, what's missing? If I can see it, I obviously get it because it's simple. Why can't I do it? That's the difference between the knowledge and skill learning. So, we know how these forms behave with light. It's very simple. When you try to paint them, it's impossible. I like that. That's like a koan. They don't match. The values don't show the simple form correctly, right? Here's the illusion being broken. This is the most difficult thing for me to understand and practice. I was trying to do some rock studies, try them along with tutorials, and then finally the wrap-up sentence. So I know how light affects simple forms. Why can I not reproduce that with simple forms? So like even the question, it repeats that phrase. So I know how light affects simple forms. Why can't I reproduce that with simple forms, right? Even that phrase is repeated, simple forms. I see it with simple forms, I can't reproduce it with simple forms. So we all deal with these factors that I'm going to talk about here right now. I'm going to start with a quote because it's actually very easy to just use smarter people's things and put them in your things that you're doing that just aren't as smart. So I'm going to get this quote from Daniel Boorstin. I'm probably mispronouncing his name right now. So the greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance, it's the illusion of knowledge. And this final sentence is what prompted me to go there. And I've had comments like this on many places where someone would say, hey, I know this, that, this as well, and many other things. So I know all those things, help me. I know all those things that I know composition, I know color, I know light, I know geometry, perspective. I know those things. I can draw from imagination, from observation, from whatever. I can use pencil, digital, 3D, etc. Help. So when someone says they know stuff, it's almost like what this quote says is, it's not that it's ignorance that's the worst thing, it's the illusion of knowledge. We all are programmed to be more self-confident than we should be. Because if you think about it, you're unlikely to attempt anything if you could really evaluate the possibility of anything happening. If you're just thinking of the fact that you live on a rock somewhere that's spinning in space and that's spinning around other stuff, and you have like this giant fireball giving you life and light and heat and all that stuff, and really we're all just consuming sun if you think about it, because that's what makes pretty much everything grow. And we're made out of what... why did I forget people's names today and everything else? We're made of Neil deGrasse Tyson, like how he said, we're made of the same thing that stars are made of. So if you kind of think like that, it's pretty unlikely or pretty weird and strange and just absolutely impossible to predict anything, right? So our brains are biased to be very self-confident and to trick us into acting, into taking action. Because if you had to evaluate everything, you would never get anything done. So getting to the core of this question here and getting a bit more focused. The illusion of knowledge is worse than ignorance because it makes you not have to actually go and do something that you should be doing. So when I read Louise's comment about, I have a question, I see it, I understand it, I get it, I can't translate it. What that signals to me is there's an illusion of knowledge going on there. If you can see it, but you can't do it, there's obviously a gap in the understanding there. But the gap isn't necessarily intellectual. And this is the analysis that Louise might be doing on the simple forms as he's trying to do them from imagination afterwards, or just trying to reproduce them from memory. I think what's happening here is that... Let me back up a little bit here. So there's a book by Barbara Oakley, which is where I got this idea from. It's called A Mind for Numbers. I think this is where I first encountered that idea. And the idea that was that when people are looking to get tested, right? So this is for school, it's for learning stuff. It's for how you learn. The book is awesome. So when they were doing this study with students, trying to get better for all their subjects, so when they had to be tested, like how well would they do, was predicted by how much they would test themselves beforehand. So how much would they try and just reproduce the desired effect versus how much did they reread and go through like all their highlights and notes. So this is, in essence, simplifying the question here. This is kind of like the same thing. When I'm testing it, I suck. So you can observe something, you observe the simple forms. So I'm looking at them, I'm reading them, essentially. And this question is the difference between being a reader versus being a writer, essentially. Those are two different skills. Reading takes a lot less. To be able to read something, whether it be simple forms or a book or whatever it might be, you have to learn a specific set of skills. But once you do that, when you're reading, you are getting better. So if you're rereading that same text, so let's say that you're looking at an image, you're looking at it over and over and over. You have that same image and you're looking at it. Every time you look at it, you actually become more fluent in that image. So that means that you've looked at it before, you figured out the important parts about it, you figured out, let's say, the lighting, you figured out the different things that are happening on there, like your camera, your perspective, maybe if it's outside, what the light sources are like, what the direction is, etc. So you've looked at it, you've figured those out, maybe you've looked at some design also, how is it organized, you've looked at all those things, you figure those out, and then the next time you see that image, you look at it again, you look for those same things, you know what to expect, like your brain gets better at that image. If you remember, and I remember this vividly from like the 3rd grade, maybe even the 1st grade, when you're reading a new text, because like that's when you're learning to read, you're reading a new text, they would ask you to read that text when you were at home. So like they would say, read this paragraph 3 times and then come back here. And they were preparing you for you to be able to read that thing better, because some kids would struggle with reading, right? Some kids would not be able to read, and then when they would be called upon to read in the classroom, they would, get up all intense and stuff because it's scary. So if you read that at home, you'd actually get more fluent in the text. So when they call on you to read, you could actually show your real skill and not show how you freeze up under tension, right? So you're becoming fluent in reading the text. When you're looking at that same image over and over and over, you're becoming more fluent in that image, which even further reinforces the illusion of knowledge. And the illusion of knowledge basically is the fact that we're all very much overconfident in what we think we know, which is why someone can come over and can say, hey, I know lighting, I know perspective, I know geometry, I know how to paint, I know how to draw, I know how to do 3D. I don't think anyone that is ever really in depth with all these things would ever claim to know any of them, really, because they're infinite. There's no way that you can know them, which is why when I see something like that, I immediately get the signal of, hey, there's probably some too much self-confidence maybe going on here, and not coming from a bad place, but just this is someone who maybe isn't sure how they learn stuff yet. And this is very difficult to break through. And this is why I'm spending so much time on it, because once you actually open up to the fact that you don't really know anything, and the things that you observe, you're not necessarily good at doing those things, at producing them. I've made this thing, I'm going to show this to you guys in a sec, and I call it the laws of understanding. I was almost going to forget that too now. It's called the laws of understanding. I don't know why I called it that. It's what I thought was a good name on that afternoon when I made it. So I could have definitely called it just, hey, this is how you should learn stuff instead. So I could have done something like that. Instead, it's called the laws of understanding. So I will show that to you in a sec, but it's basically my attempt to show how most of us, how we really think that step 1 is where understanding is. And in fact, there's a whole bunch of steps in between that you need to get through in order to really understand something. Being able to observe something, call out the important facts about it, and just like, hey, I noticed it, and I noticed this, and I noticed that, and this is the core of the question also, is I noticed the important parts. Okay, cool, but that's step 1. It's very important to notice. You need some amount of knowledge to just be able to notice what's important. When I was first starting out and I didn't know that there was such a thing as perspective, and I didn't know that a cube would converge, right? I didn't know those things, so I didn't know to look for them. So knowledge is incredibly important when you're doing this stuff, because without it, you wouldn't even be able to observe what's important. But once you've started seeing that, the process to actually get it to become a skill is different than to just look at it over and over and over. And in fact, that's where the frustration comes from. I'm looking at it more, I'm looking at it even more. I understand everything there is to understand about it. So basically, you've become fluent in that text, in the same analogy that as a reader, you've read it many times. You get better and this is the Barbara Oatley thing, is that when you reread notes, you actually get more fluent in reading the notes. So that means that, let's say you have your notes, you have your highlighter and stuff, your brain starts to pick up the pattern of, hey, where's my highlighter on each page? Which makes you just a little bit faster when you're flipping through the pages. So you go through the pages, you flip through them faster, your brain goes to the relevant place quicker, and that gives you even more of an illusion of knowledge, because like, hey, I'm reading these things so fast, I know exactly what they say. But the thing is that you're getting a cue every single time that you're opening a page and your brain remembers the pattern of even the highlighter. That's a cue for, hey, what's it say also? If you close that book and if you actually do a test of what do I remember, without the cues and without all the help that the notes are giving me, what do I remember? And this is the exact same situation here. When you close that image, when you're doing your simple forms, when you close that image, when you try and do it without, what do you remember? And the whole point of that little segment of the book that I'm trying to give you here is that testing was found out to be far more effective than just rereading. In fact, rereading, like we said, it just makes you more fluent in rereading again, which is kind of ridiculous, right? That you're becoming better at just, that doesn't even make sense, right? That your brain will automate something like that. But it's also curious to actually see the mismatch of what we think we've learned, which is we think we know the subject matter, but in fact you just got better at locating it and rereading your notes. Like that's what you got better at. It's weird, the mismatch between what we end up learning and what we think we're learning. So you always have to be very cautious when you're really doing all this stuff. It's like, what am I really learning here versus what do I think I'm doing? So small recap here, and then I'll show you the laws of understanding. And one, the illusion of knowledge. I think that if you at any point say to yourself, hey, I know this, and you mean it as in, hey, there's probably no further knowledge here that I can get, or like, yes, I've seen this before, I have experienced all the implications of this idea. I am constantly just fascinated by like perspective or lighting or any of those things, because I just realized there's a countless different ways that you can put these together, and you could always get a different result, and very often it'll be completely unexpected. So I'm always open. Like I will never think, hey, I've seen that. If it's just a desk lamp sitting on my desk at work, I'll look at it and I'll see what it does, and it'll probably surprise me with something. If you're looking at something for long enough, I think you should get surprised, even after years and years of practice, because it just means that you're looking deeper into things. You won't be surprised by the fact that it's the same desk lamp. You won't be like, it's my desk lamp, I think it's moving, it's doing something. It's not that. It's, hey, I'm noticing things that I never noticed about it before. Maybe it's the texture, maybe it's the way that it works. Maybe I'll move on from that analogy now. So illusion of knowledge, reader versus writer. Different skills. You want to become a better writer. When you're doing art, when you want to produce images, you want to become a better writer, right? Not necessarily a better reader. Not looking at an image and being able to quickly recognize what's happening. That's important, but it's also only one subpart of the whole entire skill set of being a writer with your images, of producing images. And I use writer as producer, basically. Someone that produces versus someone that consumes. A reader, when you're looking at an image, when you're reading an image, it takes you're gifted. Just at birth, you're gifted with reading images. Like when you're a baby, when you're learning to see, when you're putting all kinds of stuff in your mouth and on your face and you're just touching stuff, you're learning about materials. That's why when you look at something now, you'll need to put it in your mouth. You'll need to, well, unless it's like a donut. I always want to feel the texture of every donut. Just in here, please. So you always want to go and you want to, when you're a baby, you'll put all kinds of stuff in your mouth. You'll touch stuff. Your brain is automating what materials look like. It's remembering and figuring out. That's why when you see a specular highlight, you know that something's glossy. Your brain has just learned that. You already have your expertise. And that's why it's also hard. Because not only do you have the illusion of knowledge, you have the curse of knowledge. Which is, the curse of knowledge is, I think I talked about that about 2 videos ago, so I'm combining them together. The curse of knowledge is the fact that once you become an expert in something, you can't relate to being a non-expert. You can't remember what it was like before. You can't actually be fascinated by that specular highlight anymore, unless you really work hard to kind of just give yourself the illusion that you don't know anything, which is what I'm pushing here. So since people are very far on this side, I'm trying to actually push strongly on this side. It's not necessary that I believe that you never know anything or that you'll never learn anything fully. I'm pushing my idea so that it makes you a bit more liable to go on the side that I think we should move more on. I'm probably somewhere in the middle though. Just giving a little preface here. So illusion of knowledge, curse of knowledge, reader versus writer, and what's the solution to all this stuff? Okay, it's cool. Like, okay, I store intellectual skills, or like my verbal skills, whatever it is you said, are in one part of the brain, and then skills are stored in a different part of the brain. Okay, cool. So now what do? I still have the same problem. I'm still seeing stuff and I can't do it. What is it that I'm supposed to do? And this is where I'll show you the laws of understanding thing, and I'll need your help basically with some comments, and let me know what more you could use a little bit of an elaboration on, because these videos, the way I think about them, they tend to run at about half an hour, even though I always have the illusion that I'm going to finish in about 10 minutes. But I just need to know, out of all this stuff that I'm trying to deliver, what one thing would you need to hear more about? And then I can basically take a big video and just break it out into smaller videos and give you guys more of what you need. So I'm gonna just quickly pop this on my screen. Hopefully I'll remember to edit it for you as well. So this is the laws of understanding, and the whole entire thing that I've been covering here with I see it, I get it, but I can't do it, that's step one. That's the observation part. That's the first one that you can see. So the laws of understanding, yeah? So it's observation, and this is not any sort of diagram or anything like that. This is just my attempt to figure out, okay, we normally think that we actually understand something when we just observe it and see it. And this is something I made for students because this happens almost all the time. Someone will see something, and then when I'm like, okay, cool, so we can see it, we can observe it, how come it's not in your image? Like, how come it's not there? And then I began more and more to realize that it's just, we think we know, but we don't know. And we don't even know that we don't know. Damn, right? So observation is the first part. You have to be able to see it. Without being able to see it, you can't just find what's important about the image. It's either everything will be important, or you'll have so much data, or you'll have so little data that you won't be able to just really deconstruct what's going on there. So knowledge is crucial, but knowledge becomes toxic at some point, because a lot of us will go and just get more and more and more knowledge and never get to producing. So observation is step one. And this is my theory and my idea of what understanding is that when you understand something, you don't necessarily need to be able to talk about it. You don't have to verbalize it at all. When you understand something, you just are that thing. You know it. You don't have to say a single word, you can just execute. So you have just such a deep-seated level of understanding, of knowledge of this thing, that, and it's not just superficial intellectual knowledge. It's not just I can see it and I can name it. It's this deep-seated being able to understand all the surrounding things, because a lot of times it's not really the one thing that you don't know, it's all the surrounding implications of this thing that you're trying to do. So understanding to me is just this ability to execute. I suppose that's about it. I don't even need to over-explain that anymore. A beginner can talk a lot about why they can't do something, and a master will just be able to do it, and whether they can explain it or not, if they focused on what is it that they do and how it comes about, they should be able to explain it. If they haven't, maybe that's just not of interest to them, then they can't necessarily explain it, but they can do it still. They can produce it. They really understand the core of what it is that they're doing. Not necessarily verbally, intellectually anymore. Maybe they've even forgotten that part, but they're really working from a place where implications are stored, everything has been done so many times, and it's been tested, field tested so many different times and in so many different ways that it's just sitting there on standby, ready to fire. And when they encounter a problem, they immediately have a whole tool bag of solutions for that one problem. So they have thousands, let's call it thousands, of what are called mental representations. So they've explored a problem, struggled with it, got their one mental representation. Hey, this is what happened, this is what I did, I fixed it, storing that solution. And they've done that over and over and over. And that's what makes a master. You can't substitute experience. So observation is level 1. This is where most of us are. We'll just look at something. Okay, I get it. Okay, I get it. Like, you even get that thing where, why am I looking at this again? I know it. Like, I know it. What am I supposed to do now? I've actually used the same images for years now to just keep learning from. I have the same general bank of images that I will just go through continuously, and I'm always looking for something else. I know that those are almost like an infinite storage of info. Like, one image I could take and I could look at for design, I could look for lighting, I could look for geometry, I could look for how things are exactly arranged. Like, if it's a landscape, you know, what's the grouping? What are the different things like? What's happening? How about the atmosphere? There's so many different things that are happening. And each and every time I'm gonna look at it, I know that I will only look for one thing. So that means that I can't possibly get all the info from the image at once. I can look at it over and over and over, and as long as I'm changing, the image will be changing, or what I see from it will be changing. Because what I mean by that is I'll be looking for different things and I'll extract different info. So the image stays the same, but as long as I keep changing and looking for more things, I should be able to find new things in that image. This video is gonna run very long. So observation. Step number 1, just seeing it. Okay, I get it. Okay, I get it. That's theory, essentially. Replication is your next step. So if you can see it, let's see you prove it in a very small way. Let's just, okay, here's the thing. Try and do it over here. And replication in art tests, one, that you've observed everything, because you can say you see it, but when you actually have to replicate it, I can actually see if you're really getting it, or if you're just kind of have a vague idea of what it is that you're seeing and what's important about it. But replication really lets me know if you're able to actually extract what's important and get rid of what's not important. So replication, looking at something, being able to also, it proves whether you can use your tools. If you can't use your tools well enough to replicate, then when you go to do it from imagination or memory, you're kind of you're screwed, because one, you're going to have to rely on stored knowledge, so the problem compounds itself. If the answers are there and you can't do it, then you really need to spend some more time with your tools. I think this, like the laws of understanding thing, I'm going to break it out in its own video, so I'm just going to breeze through these, but what I'm trying to give here is kind of the solution, in a way, to what we've been talking about. So the problem, we explored the problem, then what's the solution? And the solution is kind of those steps that you have to go through here. It's not enough to just look at it and then, okay, I get it, okay, I get it. I'm gonna go try and do something with it. Okay, I failed, now what? So you need to first observe, you need to make sure that you're seeing the right things, which then also might mean you may need a bit more knowledge. So maybe you might need to get yourself some basic book on geometry, on shading, on just understanding how these things work, on rendering. Then after that, you do simple tests. So like your simple forms, copy those simple forms. Those same simple forms, just see if you can perform. Like, can your tools produce those things? Or are you just gonna have some issues to deal with before you even get to the point of producing form? Maybe your tools just need a bit more work. Application, number 3. After you've done your simple test of replicating, okay, can you now apply this thing to just, let's say those same forms, can you change one from maybe a cube to, like, can you just maybe shave off, like, start small, can you just shave off a corner of that cube? So can you apply that knowledge? Can you apply it? Or are you just merely observing still? Or are you committing to memory? Can you understand if something changed? So not only can you see and understand, but can you understand why it looks the way that it does deeply? Like, if something changed, would you be able to reproduce it? Because that's the foundation of doing stuff from imagination. Memorization is after you've been doing little tests like that, and okay, I'm gonna shave off a little corner here, I'm gonna maybe make a graphic on something, so I'm gonna basically, if I change the local value, how's it gonna change? If I change this, what's gonna happen? Memorization is after you've been looking at enough of these things, you start storing, and they all go hand in hand. So you observe, you replicate, so you're doing some tests. Application is you're doing some basic changes maybe, or you get like a simple new thing that you're going to perform. Like, can you do a cube from imagination? Memorization is after you've been doing all these things for a long time, after you've been exposed to all of those different factors, can you now do something? Like, can you maybe build a small scene? Can you just put something in there that's not there? Can you do it on a larger scale? And understanding is, these are, by the way, these are a chain. You don't just go 1 to 5, you don't just go through them, you continually go through them all, you cycle them. And you don't necessarily go 1 to 5, you might go 1, 3, 2, 4, you might go like that too. You bounce around. So understanding is when you've done this process for a pretty long time, you have replicated, so you know your tools are there, you have done small changes, you have done big changes, you have tried to not only just look and get it, but now you're trying to memorize. Hey, do I know what lighting looks like, as in a value? Like if I see a light value, would my brain interpret that as just like it's painted on, or will it interpret it as, hey, this is form turning, or this is a highlight, or this is a form being lit? Will my brain interpret it like so? So you're basically changing your understanding of how you see stuff. So this stuff is major. It's huge. And I think I'm gonna cut it off here because I can go on forever, and I think I've already went on for far too long. So your guys' help it's absolutely necessary with all this stuff. I need to know what you resonate with, what you understand, what you don't understand, what can I spend more time on, should I maybe make the videos shorter, etc. But just hit me up with questions. Your questions are what helps me know what's useful to you. So then it's useful to both of us, because there's no point in me making stuff that no one gets or is just not useful. So let me know. A lot of people have also asked how they could support the channel, and thank you very much for that. I'm really unprepared. I don't know anything about Patreon or how any of those things work, but I did put together a couple quick PayPal links. So if you'd like to, there's a monthly support there, so you can do like a monthly payment if you'd like. There's also a one-off. It's also just sharing is also good, but if you'd like to support the channel, thank you very much. You will be supported right back, so we can do this thing together and we can do more of it, can go stronger together. So I think I've done way too much video today, and I think my brain needs to go to the gym now. So thank you all very much for hanging around. Thank you if you made it through the end. Give me some comments. Let me know what you think. Please share these with anyone, just anyone. Please share these with every single person in the universe. So yeah, PayPal's there, that's there, ArtStation, Instagram, all that stuff. Thank you for watching. I will see you soon.